morning, everybody, and thank you, Antoinette, for saying my name's Tim. I realised I should have written Tim in there where it says trainer's name on that first slide. But welcome to the event today. We're going to look in the course of the morning at getting ready to teach international GCSE modern foreign languages. And I have quite a big group of people, I think, with us potentially today. So what we will do is just leave any questions that you may have until certain points in the presentation when I'll stop and we can take a few questions and deal with those. So forgive me if I don't see your question that appears in the chat. It's just really because I'm concentrating on what I'm saying as we go through the presentation, and I will come back to it. But please don't think you've been ignored, and we'll allow a little bit of time, hopefully, at the end to pick up on any of those questions. We've got quite a lengthy presentation this morning as well, so we're scheduled for a 3-hour slot. So we will try and have a little sort of comfort break at a convenient moment, just probably for five to 10 minutes, when we reach a moment where it's appropriate to do so in the presentation. So just to those things to manage your expectations a little. I'm going to begin by sort of welcoming you really to Pearson Professional Development Training. So this is our training sessions are very much designed for teachers who are teaching and looking to teach the Pearson Edexcel International GCSE specifications. And so we're kind of going to look today at identifying how the qualifications devised and the fundamental documentation, making sure you have everything. We're going to have a look at the content of the qualification, and then we're going to think about planning and exploring the course or thinking about lessons. We're going to look at trying to make sure you leave today understanding the assessment of the qualification and how to prepare your students. And also we'll talk to you a little bit about the support that's available from Pearson. And really you will forgive me, there may be things that we say you think that's fairly obvious, but this is an international qualification. We have teachers from all sorts of different backgrounds and parts of the world. So it's I will try and make sure that I say everything without making too many assumptions about anything. Now, I'm just sort of interested if we can just get you to drop into the chat which languages you're currently teaching. Can we sort of ask you just to pop into the chat which languages you're teaching, and I'm just interested to have a little look at that. Okay, thank you. French, quite a lot of French and Spanish going on. And good, and I'm going to click forward there now, and we're going to just do the welcome to Pearson. So just I'm going to say a few things about Pearson. If you haven't worked with Pearson before, you don't know too much about us. Pearson's the world's leading learning company, and it's also the UK's largest awarding organisation, which is what we also call exam board sometimes. And it's a company that goes back with a heritage over 150 years. We also kind of offer qualifications to 3.5 million students every year. So if you like a few numbers, I mean, 6,500 is the number of schools and colleges that we partner with globally. 10 million is the number of exam scripts that we mark on behalf of the UK Department for Education every year. So that's just UK students. And 70 is the number of countries where we operate worldwide. So it's a little bit of background. But we're going to sort of get in now to fairly quickly into the important parts of what we're here to do today, which is to think about this qualification in modern foreign languages, the international GCSE exam. So We're going to start by thinking about the content, and then we're going to talk about the planning, and then we'll get into the detail of each exam paper. So in terms of the content, we're going to make sure you understand and use candidates are expected to do these things. They're expected to understand and use written forms of the target language in a range of familiar and practical contexts for a variety of purposes. They're expected to understand and use spoken language. They're expected to communicate in written language, and they're expected to communicate through speaking. Okay, so those first 4 bullet points are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So we expect them to be able to deal with those in terms of skills. And then we're also expecting them to develop an understanding of the target language grammar, practical application of it. We want them to develop understanding of the countries and communities where the target language is spoken, develop positive attitudes towards modern language learning in general, and also to get this kind of proper foundation for the next level for students who are going to sort of step up to maybe an international A level, or are using this as a stepping stone qualification into something that is more demanding. A couple of things I sort of will just add to that slide, which is that when we talk about understanding of countries and communities where the target language is spoken, again, one of the things we do in the exam papers is to avoid making any assumptions about students' knowledge there, because we don't have a specific set of things that you need to teach them. So just one of the things to mention, where it's a reading or a listening paper, if a place is referred to, it will say the city of, or if a famous person is the famous actor, and so they will be provided with the necessary information to answer any of the questions. So the content, the assessment is all based on language, and then the other thing really is to say that with grammar and language and all of this, in terms of the level, we're looking at something around a B1 kind of level. So this is the sort of level at which the qualification operates as an international GCSE qualification. So for those of you who are interested where it kind of fits on an international framework, that's about where it goes. So if we have a look sort of at the 3 papers that are involved, so international French, German, and Spanish qualification, we have these 3 exam papers. So paper 1 is a listening paper. It's a 30-minute paper, and the candidates have 5 minutes reading time at the beginning. So before the 30 minutes paper starts, the candidates have 5 minutes to read through the paper. It's worth 40 marks. There are 7 tasks that are based on a single recorded text. So each task has its own recorded audio, and 25% of the total goes on listening. Paper 2 is reading and writing, and that's an hour and 45 minutes, and it's 40 marks for reading and 40 marks for writing. And that's 50% of the total. And we'll look in detail at the papers as we go forward. We're just looking at the overview here. And paper 3 is the speaking. Speaking is a compulsory part of this qualification, and I know in some other qualifications it may be a sort of optional part, but speaking is a compulsory part. And the test lasts 8 to 10 minutes, worth 40 marks. And again, it's 25% of the total international GCSE. Okay, so that's really the overview of the assessment and how the papers work. And as I say, we'll look a little bit further on at the actual detail of those. But let's just have a look at the content and what it is you are going to need to teach. So the content is divided into those 5 topic areas. So home and abroad, education and employment, personal life and relationships, the world around us, and social activities, fitness and health. And each of those topics is divided into some subtopics. So in each case, there are 5 subtopics. So as you see, home and abroad, it covers life in the town and rural life, holidays, tourist information and directions, services, bank, post office, etc., customs, everyday life, traditions and communities, and so on. And that list, of course, is available in the specification in the documents that you will have been sent a link to yesterday. And Antoinette, our host today, has put the link to those documents also in the chat. So anybody who didn't get them can scroll back and right to the beginning of the meeting and download those there. Now, a couple of things really to say about the topics. What we will say to you is that each task, each exercise in any of the papers will be focused on a specific subtopic. So if, for example, we've got a question that's about special occasions, the whole question, if it's reading or listening, speaking or writing, will be focused on special occasions. So we don't mix and match special occasions with house and home, or special occasions with school life and routine, etc. So each of the tasks is focused on a subtopic, so they stay within the subtopic, but of course across the listening and reading and speaking papers, we will test elements of all of those subtopics. So that's one thing. So we kind of stay on topic. And the other thing just to notice there is that there are some asterisks. So in topic A, services has an asterisk. Role model, in topic C, role models and childhood have an asterisk. And in topic D, weather and climate. And in topic E, accidents, injuries, common ailments and health issues. And those asterisks are there because those are parts of the specification where we would only test that in reading and listening activities. We don't test those in speaking and writing. Because they're kind of sensitive issues for certain people. Services is a sensitive issue because we don't want to tempt students into making political comments, for example. Role models, childhood, you can see there's some sensitivity possibly there. Weather and climate, if you happen to live in a part of the world where weather and climate is challenging, or there've been extreme weather events, we don't encourage them or require them to have to speak or write about those things. And accidents, injuries, common ailments, and so on. So as you're teaching, as you're thinking about it, you don't need to practice speaking and writing activities which are about any of those things with an asterisk, okay? It's not to say that you couldn't mention the weather in some other piece of writing that you do, but we don't need to specifically practice those things. So bear in mind those little bits with the asterisk, because they're kind of important really to planning your delivery of the course. So we want to just talk to you a little bit about the specification and the sample assessment materials. Now, the specification is the key document that you need to read before you start to teach the course, and that outlines the key content, assessment, and also the core objectives. And then alongside that, the second key document really is the sample assessment materials. And they're very important documents because they're the first set of assessments to be actually written by the examiners. So both the specification and the sample assessments form the basis for all live examinations. So just make sure that you are absolutely focused on the specification and on the sample assessment materials, and indeed any of the past papers. And I say this because, of course, we'll talk to you at the end about textbooks and things, but there are published textbooks for these specifications. But sometimes people confuse almost the textbook with the specification and the exam. So the textbooks are designed to help you deliver the specification, but the the law, if you like, of the land with these qualifications is the specification, and that is exemplified in the sample assessment materials. So the sample assessment materials and any past papers are examples of what you can expect to come in future papers. Okay, so keep that very closely in mind. And sometimes the textbooks have tasks, you know, maybe the level might not be quite the same, or the length of a reading passage might not be quite the same. So they're great for teaching, but assessment is very much based on what you will find in the specification and in the sample assessment materials. And now, of course, exemplified in any sort of past papers. One of the things we will say about Pearson papers is that they're very consistent in terms of the layout and design. So you will see, if you look through a set of past papers over a period of years, that actually the format of the test is the same. The content is different. We're testing different language, of course, but the format of the test remains consistent. So let's have a look through the different papers then. So we're going to just talk to you about the listening first. So the listening paper, there are 7 extracts, 7 recorded extracts. Sometimes they're a single voice, sometimes they're a conversation. They're drawn from a variety of different sources, but just to mention that these all will be recorded at a fairly gentle pace by actors in a studio. So they're not authentic in the sense that they're kind of taken from recordings that are made in the real world. They're planned and recorded, but they will have an authentic source. They've kind of come from somewhere that's been adapted. So they could be short statements, monologues, dialogues, 2 to 3 speakers sometimes. They cover a range of situations. They relate to all the general topic areas that we looked at. And as I mentioned, they don't require any specialist and or technical target language vocabulary or detailed specialist knowledge of the topics. Okay, there is a vocabulary list in the specification at the end, and that's really your best guide to the level of vocabulary that's likely to be tested. We don't say that that list covers absolutely every word that students may need, because they may have some vocabulary from outside it. And indeed, certainly for speaking and writing, they can use whichever vocabulary they would like to use if they've got something that's a particular interest of theirs. But we don't force it. So given that the level of the qualification is where it is, it's an international, it's a GCSE, it's a level 2 qualification. We're not asking them to have detailed background knowledge. One task is used with each listening extract. So the skills in listening are to identify and note the main points, extract specific details, identify points of view, recognize attitudes, emotions, and opinions, deduce the meaning of words from context, and show some understanding of unfamiliar language. And when we say unfamiliar language, usually what will happen is that there will be a list of something, and in that list is perhaps a word that's not on the specification, but you will know from the list of other words around it that it must be a fruit, or that it must be a color, or that it must be something. So that idea of the ability to kind of deduce the meaning of words from context is something that will be part of the testing, but quite minimally. There isn't a huge amount of that. And just in terms of where you can find the listening extracts, so for the specification and the sample assessment, you can find those things on the website. Have a look at the past papers, and you will find all of those things on the Pearson website. And the next slide here also gives you some other places where you might find some listening extracts and listening materials from. So again, just some useful links that we might find them that we might find helpful. One of the things we do as well as we go through these trainings is we offer you some possible activities for developing the skills. So we're just going to do a little bit of that now while we're talking about listening. So, you know, the are you listening carefully activity. So, for example, you could ask 3 students to go to the front of the class, choose a topic like holidays, and the rest of the task need to ask the students at the front questions in the target language on this topic. So where did you go on holiday last year? What was the best thing about the holiday, etc. And then make a note of some of the answers. And once the group has asked, for example, 5 questions of each of the 3 students, divide the group into small teams and ask them to put their hand up if they know the answer to some questions you're going to ask in the target language. So which student went walking in the Swiss Alps? You know, what was the best thing about Fred's holiday? And so on. And then you can award points appropriately. So they ask each other, you make notes, and then you ask them. And so this is about developing the listening skill. Remember, of course, as we sort of all know as languages teachers, that there's a difference between speaking and writing and reading comprehension. And a lot of it's to do with memory, because with listening comprehension, you really need to understand not just the language, but you need to hold that language. You need to hold those things in your memory long enough to be able to answer the question. So don't underestimate the need to do activities like this that are not just about did you understand in the moment, but can you hold on to that information long enough to answer the question? And then other things that we might do, you might get them to identify points of view and recognize attitudes, emotions, and opinions. So for this activity, students work in pairs. Student A talks in the target language about, for example, a place that he or she would like to visit, something they'd love to eat, and then just giving subtle hints as to the specific place or food. And then student B has to pick up on these subtleties and at the end recommend somewhere something suitable for the speaker based on his or her explanation. So the student A says, I like sweet food and I like creamy food, and I like to eat when I'm walking in the street. And then student B might suggest ice cream, for example. And then speaker A confirms or rejects the usefulness of the suggestion and gives some reasons. So students then are sort of encouraged to discuss how they identified and used appropriate clues to help them infer and recognize preference, opinions, viewpoints. And again, these skills, particularly as we move up the reading, up the listening paper, become more important. One thing I think perhaps I've neglected to say when I was just doing the overview of the papers is that all of our papers, and it's a part of Pearson design, are designed to be ranked from the simplest task up to the most challenging. So I know other exam boards sometimes have a kind of wave pattern of differentiation, and it gets a bit harder and then it gets a bit easier, and then again sometimes they end on a nice easy question at the end. But Pearson papers are ramped from the most straightforward up to the most challenging, and that's a design feature which is useful, I think, for teachers, because in listening, you might see, well, actually, certain students are really starting to struggle when we get to question 5, for example, and that gives you an idea of how your students are performing in that particular skill area. Okay, so that ramping is useful to be aware of. Well, again, when we look at the papers, we'll have a little bit more of a look in further detail. So a few things there with listening, the overview. Now we're going to talk to you about reading now, and I want to just think about the paper 2. So remember that paper 2 has reading and writing, but we're going to think about the reading section first. So the reading section has 5 tasks, and they're based around a collection of short texts or a longer single text. There's a different task type for each stimulus text, so different question types, and again we'll have a look a little further on. And we've got, again, authentic, factual, non-factual material of varying length, different registers, contexts, different sources. So it's varied. And some a little bit more formal, some a little bit less formal, some more for public consumption, others more for kind of letters and emails to friends and that sort of thing. And there is also one short extract from a literary text, and that's a requirement of the specification that students deal with a short literary text. And these literary texts, keep in mind, will also be adapted and abridged as appropriate to bring them into the level that we need for GCSE. So in terms of kind of teaching those literary texts, the skill for reading is exactly the same as you would do with any other text that you're teaching. Just, I think, for you to make sure that students are aware that, you know, literary text might have some different features. There might be a little bit of dialogue, there might be metaphor, simile, that all those things that they will have found as they've studied you know, their own language. If they've done English at GCSE, for example, all of those things that they will have found in text could be there. So just I think that's the only thing really that is kind of a thing that just they need to be aware of for literary extracts. And those could be from letters, short stories, novels, plays, whatever particular source, but they still relate to the general topic areas. So all of it will fit into the general topic areas. And the skills are about identifying and noting main points, extracting specific details, etc., etc. Just the same skills really that we saw in listening. Just remember that, of course, reading, we can ask for a little bit more sometimes because we don't have the challenge of memory because they have the text in front of them. And then a few places where you might find some reading text. So there are some websites there that you might find useful. And also just all of the things we were saying about sample assessments, specimen papers, past papers, and also GCSE reading papers and GCSE literary text. Remember as well that this is an international qualification, so it's slightly different from the UK GCSE, but Pearson also offers a UK and England rather GCSE. And for the GCSE for England has texts and materials that you can also usefully use. So you do have now a big bank of materials that you can use from past papers that will kind of support the teaching. And as I mentioned, there are some websites there that you might find helpful. And then just to do a few little kind of reading activity ideas as well. So you might get students to do things like identify and note the main points. So students skim read the text once without stopping for unfamiliar words, sounding out the words in their heads without vocalizing. And then the students answer the questions who, what, when, where, why. They match headings or subtitles provided by the teacher to paragraphs, or they might complete sentences with a gap-fill task designed to address the overall theme of the text. So that noting the main points is important. So that teaches them that ability to read a text quickly and pick up information without being blocked by words that they don't know. Okay, when we have actual questions set for comprehension, and it's you know, at what time did something happen? If you can't find that, you can't answer the question. But when we're skimming through and we're looking for who, what, when, where, why, etc., or we might be matching some headings or subtitles to the paragraphs and so on, there's a lot more information that they can use, and so they can be successful in getting through the text without understanding everything. Of course, the experience of reading in a foreign language is always that there can be words that you don't know. And then get them give them some practice as well on extracting specific details. So Scanning allows students to search a text for a particular piece of information, for example, the date of a historical event or the time the train's leaving, etc. And you can get students to identify and highlight words or phrases or synonyms, antonyms for particular words as they're directed by the teacher. Sometimes I think reading is a bit of an unloved skill, and I think it's important as teachers and that we kind of develop that consciousness. It's one of those things very easy to give reading comprehension, just to kind of give some homework, give something to do, but actually developing the skills are very useful. And actually also, if we develop the skills of slower reading, sometimes we actually enable students to write and speak better, because those texts that they're using for reading and also the audio that they're using for listening is a sort of model of what we would want them to be looking to produce themselves. So onward a little bit with activities for reading skills, identifying points of view and recognizing attitudes. So anything that you can do that develops that is also very useful. So using simple context clues can help students start to understand implied viewpoints. For example, I love my job, I go to school every day, and I help my students to learn French. The question might be, what am I, how do I feel about my job? So again, I think, giving them that pointer that actually sometimes there are questions that require them to draw a simple inference, and they need to be adept at connecting ideas. And this is also developing higher order thinking in our students. And so we can even have these things can happen at a very simple level, you see. So, I love going to the cinema, and then, watches films becomes your multiple choice answer. So we're connecting cinema with film. It's a very simple inference, a very simple thing to do, but practicing those connections and making sure that they're aware that sometimes the answer isn't exactly in front of you, have to do a bit of thinking, is useful for students. And then you can make those contexts more challenging as you go forward. And then things like detective stories, short mystery stories, or whodunit stories can also be useful for developing this reading skill. So students read the extracts text closely and use the clues they find to think critically about what's in and not in the text. And that also improves their ability to infer from what they've read. And onwards then, let's have a look now at the second part of paper 2, which is the writing and grammar section. So busy paper 2. So they've done their reading section. The section 2 is writing and grammar, and they're expected to do 2 writing tasks and 1 grammar-based task. So we have a short writing task, which is 60 to 75 words, and that includes 4 prescribed words or short phrases. And we'll look again, as I say, in detail at the papers later on, but those are words or phrases that students must include in what they write. We have then a longer writing task between 130 and 150 words, and there's a choice of 3 questions drawn from different topics, and each question has 4 bullet points. And then we have a grammar-based task, and candidates need to manipulate the language, and it's verbs and adjectives. Okay, so they need to fit the correct verb or the correctly formed adjective into the gap. We'll have a look in a moment, but it is only verbs and adjectives that are tested. And sometimes they need to be changed, and sometimes they don't. But we'll have a look when we get there if you're not familiar with it. A couple of things, I suppose, to add about the writing and grammar. The 65 to 75 and 130 to 150 words, those are guidelines, and in practice, if a candidate writes a lot more, examiners will mark it. So examiners don't count. I don't think those are, they're not cut off. There isn't a cut off. Everything they write will be marked. But just in terms of guiding your students, really best practice is to try to stick to the word count as far as you possibly can. But really, all they sort of need to know is that they have about, in their handwriting, they have about 10 words on a line. So, 13 to 14 lines is enough. And obviously, each of those bullet points is awarded. When we look at the mark schemes, you'll see in terms of the content marks for writing, and also they will target different areas of language and vocabulary. So there isn't any stipulation that they must cover the 4 prescribed words in the 60 to 75 word task equally, but probably it is good practice that 15 to 20 words about each of those, because that gives better range of language and better range and variety of content. And similarly with the 130 to 150 word task, we're looking at 4 bullet points there. So again, we're sort of looking at probably some kind of 35 words per bullet point, with a little bit at the beginning and the end. So I think that one of the things I can sort of say as an examiner over many years really is that answers that are too long or too short are almost self-penalizing, because they write too much and they make more mistakes, and sometimes they drift off the topic. They write too little, they don't cover enough range. And they do have a lot to do in the time. So I think that even if you have really able students and I could write loads more, don't go for quality over quantity. And in terms of the skills, well, we're asking them to write for a variety of audiences. We're asking them to use a wide range of grammatical forms, and also a wide range of relevant and appropriate vocabulary. So in terms of where you're going to practice the SAM, the writing task, where you find those things, as we mentioned for listening and reading, you've got the sample assessments, you've got the specimen papers, you've got past papers, and lots and lots of things in the GCSE papers as well. GCSE for the England GCSE, there are lots of activities and materials that you can use there. The structure is a little different, but not so different that those don't make really useful practice for you. And there's also a link there to a TES teaching resource that you might find useful for developing writing skills. And just a few sort of a couple of little kind of activities really. So, one of the things you can usefully do is exploit a reading text to focus on an aspect of grammar and tenses. So, students can allocate time frames to different parts of the text. They can identify specific verb forms with the text and then come up with, for example, the infinitive and some other verb forms. They could change the tenses of the verb. They could change the person. They could work from the verb forms to create related nouns, adjectives, or adverbs based on known language patterns. They can identify and note more complex structures, etc. So I mentioned when we were doing the reading, using reading for writing, and it's a useful use of reading. It's a useful reading activity, but harvesting some of those things that they could use for writing is something that we need to probably encourage students to do more and more. So on we go. We're going to have a look now at speaking and the paper 3. So just the overview then of paper 3. There are 3 tasks, A, B, and C, that need to be conducted in consecutive order. So the order is important. And just to remind you, there is training content, and we provide training courses specifically on conducting the speaking. We've run those already for the first time this term, but I think there will be more coming along. So please join us again for conducting the speaking exam, particularly if it's your first time, because there are some technical things to know that we won't have time to deal with in complete detail here. And that training content will also be available, I think, on the website for you to watch the video, to listen in. But it's always good if you can join one of those things live. So 3 tasks, A, B, and C. So task A is a picture-based discussion. So students talk about a picture that they've previously selected. So they choose their own picture. And it can be from any of those subtopics, except you remember the ones with the little asterisk that we're going to say you mustn't talk about those. So you need to just make sure that they've got an appropriate picture. And the picture also needs to contain people, a location, and some interactions between the people as well. But those things are clarified in the specification. So they do this picture-based discussion, and then task B and task C are effectively the same task. They're conversations on topics. So they have a conversation on 2 topics which haven't been specifically prepared, so that we're expecting that conversation to be fairly spontaneous. Now, it's not to say you won't have taught them the topics, but they won't know what topic they're going to get until they are in the exam. And we're going to make sure that those conversations are relatively spontaneous. Okay, so that's kind of important. It needs to be a conversation, and to make sure that this spontaneity is maintained, Pearson provides a randomization grid, and that determines which topics are to be examined in tasks B and task C. So you will be told, for a particular student, this student needs to do topic area D or whatever. And again, just to remind you that those topics with the asterisk are things that we don't expect teachers to ask students to talk about in the speaking exam. And of course, the skills are the skills that are described there. So can they describe the contents of the picture? Can they talk about past or future events related to people in the picture? Can they respond to questions about the picture and its related topic? Can they take part in a spontaneous conversation? And each of the conversations must enable students to develop their responses, show some initiative, express and justify points of view, refer to past and future events. Okay. In the pack of materials that you've got there are student tests that you can listen to, and I would recommend, we probably won't have time during the session today, but I would recommend that you do listen to those, and also as I mentioned, the training events that we run online, particularly if you're new to the qualification, just making sure that you're getting those things right for your students, and just understanding the technical requirements, because that's always a kind of an important part of making sure that those speaking tests run effectively. And again, where do you find the stuff? Well, SAMs and specimen papers, all of the GCSE materials as well, and there are some website links there that you might also find useful. Just again, a couple of little sort of speaking activities that you might like to think about using to develop the speaking skills. So target talk. So to what, we provide students with a question: to what extent are young people dependent on the internet nowadays? And then they just they take a card with and we have to connect it with that theme. Okay, so we have the question, but we're wanting to connect internet to sport, or internet to television, internet to communication, school, and so on. And also similarly, kind of things with discussion cards as well. Students A and B. So student A are given cards relating to a topic, and they have to talk to student B about what's on their card, e.g. for about a certain amount of time, 4 minutes. It's a long time, 4 minutes, but you give them a time. And then student B then moves on to the next student A. So they kind of go round and talk about the topic on their card, so that we vary the discussion, we vary the language that's used. And the other thing I suppose we want to talk about is kind of supporting transferable skills. So we have a transferable skills framework that underpins the qualification. And I think, again, that's sort of quite useful for you, just to, particularly if you're looking at this qualification for the first time, and sometimes you might have a whole school initiative on developing a particular area of the curriculum, and you think, well, you know, how does the people will in the senior management might say, well, how does the languages department support this? And that mapping grid of transferable skills is quite a useful thing to be looking at. It always strikes me that one of the real transferable skills that we teach for as languages teachers is listening, because for the most part, you know, if you do an international GCSE in English, you do it in your own language, the listening skill, we test reading comprehension, but we don't develop listening skills. And you know, you will know that perhaps in those of you who are in England, that oracy is becoming a big focus of primary curriculum, and so again, you know, we are playing our part in the wider educational offer to the students that we teach. Okay, now we've kind of done that rattle through the overview of the qualification. I think we've told you lots of information, given a few sort of teaching ideas. And what I want to do now is we're going to sort of move on to looking at the assessment and the exams. We're going to look at the assessment objectives first, briefly, a bit of technical information, and then we're going to sort of look at digging into each of the papers. So it's the next session really is about putting some of the big picture things that I said already into a context for you, so you see what it actually looks like in reality. So we have 4 assessment objectives. Okay, so our first assessment objective is listening, and we expect students to be able to do those things: identify and note main points, extract specific details, identify points of view, recognize attitudes, emotions, and opinions, deduce the meaning of words from context, and show some understanding of unfamiliar language. Okay, and we expect them to be able to do those things as part of listening comprehension. So that skill is worth 25% of the qualification. And reading is very much the same thing. So it's all about the comprehension, and that skill is 25% of the qualification. And just remember the thing I was saying about the difference between listening and reading is quite often about memory, and so that is sometimes why the students struggle with listening, because the memory skills are not quite, you know, and sometimes it's supported memory. Remember, in our listening papers, students can write at any time. So are they making notes? Are they writing things down as they're listening, or are they just focused on trying to find the answer to a question, which is not going to be just about one word? It will tend to be about a short phrase or the whole sentence. So just to think about those differences between listening and reading in terms of how we teach the skills, but in terms of what's being assessed, we're assessing effectively the same thing. So assessment objective 2 then is writing. So for writing, students need to communicate in writing using a register appropriate to the situation, showing knowledge of a range of vocabulary in common usage, and of the grammar and structures prescribed in the specification, and using them accurately. Just a few things really to say about register. We want it appropriate to the situation, but because this is for most students a fairly straightforward first examination, in the subject, and we're not kind of going much beyond the B1 level. We are concerned with register only up to a certain point, and it's for the most part something that is used a little bit more in speech than in writing, because writing will tend to be a first and third person activity. So we're looking for the awareness of it, but not necessarily for that to be something that kind of concerns you as teachers overly much, or students overly much either, really, in terms of writing. Moreover, when we talk about register, we're talking about, making sure that if we're writing an email to a friend, for example, as a task, that's where you might have the slightly more informal phrasing, the little bits of slang that your students might have enjoyed. They always enjoy learning those things. That's where that might go in, but it wouldn't necessarily fit in something that was an article. So I think for students in writing, it's just to have a look at what the task is and think about who the audience is, and be aware of that. So that leads me on to the thing that it says at the bottom of that slide, that the section requires students to write for a variety of audiences, such as friends and acquaintances, teachers, family members, groups, and professional bodies. And you see that there's a sort of upwarding kind of formality going through those things. The things you might say to friends and acquaintances are not quite the things that you would write to a professional body. And we want that range of grammatical forms, and also the range of relevant and appropriate vocabulary. So the speaking, the writing assessment objective looks like that. And of course, the other productive skill is the speaking, and the speaking looks very similar too. So students need to communicate in speech, showing knowledge of a range of vocabulary in common usage, and of the grammar and structures prescribed in the spec, and they need to use them accurately. So they need to do these things. They need to describe the contents of a picture. They need to talk about possible past or future events. They need to be able to respond to questions about the picture. They need to be able to take part in a spontaneous conversation. And in each of those conversations, they need to be able to develop their responses, show initiative, express and justify points of view, and refer to past, present, and future events. Okay. So those are the speaking things, and as I say, we will have a little look at speaking in a bit more detail further on in the presentation. Now, just a word or two really about marking and assessment now. So I think it's worth making absolutely clear to you, and it may be a nice relief to people who might be joining from different different qualifications, that you don't need to do any marking or assessment of anything for this qualification. You will mark your students' classwork and homework, of course, but for this qualification, so listening and reading, everything is marked by Pearson examiners, and the same for speaking and writing. So teachers are not involved in any marking or assessment for any part of the qualification. But just a sort of bit of kind of guidance for you as you're marking classwork, homework kind of activities. In listening and reading, we're not too concerned. What we're looking for as examiners is reliable evidence of comprehension. And so provided the candidate has provided reliable evidence of comprehension, we're not concerned if they've slightly misspelt the word, provided it's recognizable in the context. And listening and reading is marked against a points-based mark scheme. So each answer will be worth 1 mark. Okay, so sometimes, therefore, single word answers are absolutely fine. Remember what I said about we're looking for reliable evidence of comprehension. So a candidate who answers their question by, for example, copying out a large chunk of the text from reading hasn't shown that they've understood. All they've shown is that they think the answer is in there somewhere. So that is not a good strategy. We want them to answer the question with the word or short phrase from the text or based on the text or the audio that shows that they have understood. And so we're looking for evidence, reliable evidence of comprehension. And in speaking and writing, we're marking against some grids, really, which describe performance at different levels. And again, for speaking and writing, as we mark speaking and writing, we're looking for the best fit. And sometimes there will be parts of those descriptors that you think, well, I'm not sure whether this quite describes what this candidate has actually done, but the best fit will still be within that particular grid box in the mark scheme because they do most of it. So again, we look for best fit. For reading and listening, that point-by-point mark scheme, remember too that the mark schemes that we publish can only, we can't always put all the correct and incorrect answers on there. So sometimes students will come up with, and candidates do it, you know, when we mark every year, there are, they come up with a way of expressing their answer, which shows reliable evidence of comprehension, but isn't the exact answer that's on the mark scheme. So kind of use that as your sort of acid test. If you think they've understood and they've expressed their answer in a way that shows they've understood, then they will get their mark. And so we don't always put every correct possible answer on the mark scheme because you just couldn't, okay, or indeed every possible reject. Okay, so for reading and listening, has comprehension been achieved? Have we got reliable evidence of comprehension? And if so, they get the mark. And for speaking and writing, we look at the descriptor in the box and we try to find the best fit. Okay, so those are kind of little bits of guidance, which for those of you who haven't been examiners, it's important just to kind of get that those sort of basics very clear in your minds, really. And then just something that I will sort of talk about in terms of kind of getting your students ready for the exams. Walking, talking mocks are a really good way to do it, which is where you sit your students ideally in the same room where they'll do their exam and in the same seats, but that's not always possible. But if you can, and they're given an exam paper close to the real thing, and then you just take them through step by step. So the exam itself, well, we're going to spend rather more time than you would actually have in the real exam, but we take them through each of the instructions. We show them in small steps how they go about the exam. We maybe allow them some planning time, and then we get them to write their responses in timed conditions when they're told to move on to that part of the question. So really sort of granular approach to exam preparation can be really helpful for students, and that kind of practical what do you underline, what is your strategy, because having a strategy is a reassuring thing for them when they sit down in that exam room. And that also gives them the familiarity with the way that the papers work. And one of the things I will say again is that the consistency of the Pearson papers, the fact that the tasks and the layout and all of those things will be familiar and consistent year on year on year is important, because it means for reading, listening, whatever it is, for writing, you will be able to teach them some strategies to deal with the question, and they should be able to apply those strategies quickly and in an efficient way when they get into the exam. Okay, so we're going to just remind you a little bit of the overview of the assessment requirements again. So we remember that we have those assessment requirements, we've got those assessment objectives and weightings. So we've looked at those already. If we look at how they fit into the assessment objectives and the examination papers, they look like that as well. So we've kind of covered that information, but 25% on each skill, but that's spread across 3 papers as opposed to 4 if you were more familiar with the GCSE in England. Now, I'm going to move on as well now to talk to you a little bit about the vocabulary core list. At the end of the specification, you'll find that there's a vocabulary core list, minimum core list, and that's there to help you plan your scheme of work for your students. So questions are targeted at grades 1 to 5, and any of those targeted grades 1 to 5 will be based on this list, although these questions might include some unfamiliar vocabulary. So for the lower grades, if you like, grades 1 to 5, you can expect pretty much that the vocabulary list will enable you to deal with all of those questions. And the vocab list is listed under different topics and subtopics. And as I mentioned, they're in Appendix 1 of the specification, and that should also be in your delegate pack as well. So it's a good place to start with vocabulary is with that minimum core list. Okay. Now we're going to have a look in detail now, as I mentioned, paper by paper. So we'll have a look at the first section of this. Then we're going to have a little break, and then we will we'll move on to looking at the rest of the papers. But we're going to have a little dig into the papers now. So here we go. Paper 1, listening. So you'll remember that paper 1 was a 40-mark paper. It's 30 minutes paper, and the candidates have 5 minutes reading time before the exam begins. There are 7 recorded extracts that have an incline of difficulty, so they get gradually more difficult. And the task types include multiple choice, multiple matching, note-taking, table completion, gap fill, etc. And we'll see those things as we go through. And again, different voices. You might hear monologues, dialogues, sometimes a 3-person conversation. The language used will be delivered at a moderately slow pace, so it's designed to be accessible to students, and it will be, as far as we possibly can, standard, clear French, Spanish, German, etc. We don't include regional accents or variations. We try to make sure that it's in terms of the level of the qualification, that there shouldn't be anything there that should cause any particular difficulties for students in terms of comprehension. It's standard language that we're using. And students hear each recorded extract twice. But the recording is continuous. You play the recording, and the pauses for them to write and the beeps when they need to move on to the next question are there exemplified in the past papers that you can find. So you'll see how it works. For the most part, there's ample time. In fact, sometimes almost so much time you wonder if the machine has stopped working because there are really nice big pauses. But the students hear everything twice, and it's important for them to know that they do. And I'd also, kind of as a bit of guidance, one of the things that I notice sometimes goes wrong is jumping to conclusions about answers, because sometimes there's a little bit of distraction in the text. There's an idea that's sort of hinted at in one of the questions, but isn't quite the right idea. So we need to encourage active listening to both playings of the recording, even if you think you've got the answer right the first time, because it isn't always guaranteed. So have a look through the kind of question types that we've got. So we have a question type that looks like this. So sometimes students might be asked to give a positive opinion, a negative opinion, or a positive and negative opinion. So they would hear those people speak. That's an example of one of our objective question types. So actually they just need to put crosses in the box. And there are 6 marks, 6 people. We hear each of those people speak. And each of those people will give a positive, a negative, or a positive and negative opinion about the topic. Okay. If we look at our question 6, this is a question that works a little bit more around the fitting words into a grid. So here students write the letter for the word that fits into the little space where the 3 dots are. Those words might fit in the middle of a sentence. Sometimes they fit at the end, so they can go in different places. And of course, you know, in terms of what students might be usefully doing with their preparation time, is to have a look at tasks like that and think, well, grammatically, which word could possibly fit? You know, which are the nouns, which are the verbs, which are the adjectives, which are the possible ones? And that's the sort of thing that we quite often you might annotate there, and they might put, you know, F or L for one of them, and then they listen and they narrow it down. So that again is a useful sort of strategy for students to be practicing applying, particularly doing those walking, talking mock exams. That's the sort of thing that you would ask them to do when they got the paper to read through. So they do read through everything, but for some of those tasks, a little bit of preparation work ahead of the listening can be a useful thing for them to learn to do. And question 7 then, and this is a question from a French paper. This one, again, as you see, we're stepping up in the levels of demand. And so for this one, they have to write a little bit of something in French. So we're expecting them to fill in that grid, and they get 6 marks for each of those answers that they put in. Notice as well that we've got, so in this particular example, we're going to hear 2 positive aspects from each person and from each speaker, and then we're going to have 1 negative aspect from each speaker. So students need to be aware of how that task works, but we're only looking for very short answers. And also, we will mention that because for both reading and listening, we are only assessing comprehension. We're not assessing their, we said we don't test their spelling. So it is also acceptable for them to lift the exact word. If all they do is transcribe the word or short phrase from what they've heard, that's absolutely fine, provided it answers the question. So sometimes that question about whether they have to use their own words arises, but we don't require that. There are no marks for quality of language for reading or listening, and so we don't have any reason to withhold marks because they didn't use their own words. Okay, so no need to use their own words really is the message from there. Now, I'll mention to the examiner reports. Examiner reports are produced every series for each paper, and we would really encourage you to read those carefully, and particularly if you're joining Pearson new to teaching this qualification now, that you spend a bit of time to read through those over a period of you find is that you have information that really will help you train your students to target their answers. And there are examiners, principal examiners will see lots and lots of scripts. You, of course, you only see them for your own students, don't you, in your own centre, in your own school. But when you're an examiner, you see them across a range of schools across the world, and you begin to pick up some trends and some kind of issues. And as far as we possibly can as principal examiners, we give you that feedback and guidance that you could use just to say to your students, look, look out for this particular issue. There's a particular problem that examiners have noticed with this particular question type. Don't you go making that same mistake. And I won't take your time now to read through that particularly, but we will kind of get you to do a little activity in a moment when we have a break. But that's the sort of level of detail that you're going to get from your examiner's report. And it picks up on common misapplications of the question. It picks up on common issues, but also recognises the success that Oxford Candidates will have had. Now, what I'm going to get you to do now is we're going to have a little pause. We're going to have a little break. So it's 10:12 now. I'm only going to suggest we take about let's take 5 minutes. So 10:13. So if we can come back at 10:18, and it would be useful if you could have a look in your pack. And have a look at the mark scheme and examiner reports for the past series in the language folder, and just have 5 minutes to read through those. Have a quick look through. You don't need to pick up any particular details. I just want you to make sure that you can find them. And then if you have time, you can have time to have a little break as well. So I'll see you back in about 5 minutes. Point. Hopefully you've been able to locate some of the materials in the download pack. I was just checking on the chat as we were going through. So I think there was a question about whether this is also applicable to Chinese, the things that we're saying here. And for the most part, yes, the focus and the examples that we're using today are from French, Spanish, and German, but the structure, as I understand it, is the same structure. So just to kind of clarify on that, I think what I say today will be, for the most part, true for the Chinese qualification as well. And there was also a question about whether we're looking at the 2024 UK qualifications, which are new for Pearson, and the answer to that one is no. So this is specifically going to focus on international. Although if you're with us today and you're not preparing students for the international, but there are some similarities, but this is specifically relating to the international qualification. So if you're involved in and interested in the England, the UK, the England qualification, do please make sure you go on to one of the training events for that one, because there are some differences. Okay, so we're going to have a look at reading now, and we're going to do similar sort of thing. I'll just sort of take you through and give you a little flavour of the papers. So reading, it's a 40-mark paper. It's a reading and writing paper, of course, and so the time is 45 minutes, but 40 minutes for reading and 40 minutes for writing, and a total of 80 marks, but of course 40 marks for each skill. We have 5 reading passages in the target language, and remember, all of the questions on the international qualifications are also in the target language. There won't be any questions asked in English, which is a difference from the UK, the England qualifications. we have one text that's taken from a literary source, as mentioned, and question 4 requires some note taking from the text. And then for the writing section, we've got 3 writing and, well, 2 writing and 1 grammar task. And we'll have a look at those as we go through. Okay. So this is a question 3. So this is a kind of middle grade question. So for the, kind of getting an idea of the level of language we're in reading, we didn't have time to look at the transcript. This was from a 2023 Spanish question. And so those 3 people say something. You remember now what we were saying about how you might use some of that language for developing speaking and writing. There's some good modeling as well, those of you who read Spanish. So the 3 people say something, how they're thinking of celebrating their birthday. And we have an objective task that looks a bit like that. And so we're having to say, which of those 3 people says each of those things. Okay, so we've got those things going on. Now, you'll notice that there are 8 marks available for that task. So it may well be that one of those people says those things, both of them, so it may well be, for example, that at B, where it says, I want lots of presents, it might be 2 of them that say that. And sometimes there might be one where nobody says it. So it isn't just 1 per utterance. Sometimes they have to read it across 2. So just again, as you're doing your walking, talking mock, or you're getting your students ready for that task, just make sure that they are pointed to that information. Look, it says in the instruction, put across in the 8 correct boxes, watch out. It's possible that some statements or people have more than 1 cross or none. So just be aware of that as you're preparing students for that particular task type. And that will be the same task type, French, Spanish, German, will have the same format. So question 4 in the paper then is the one that's based on the literary text, and it's a short adapted extract. It will have come from an authentic source, but it will have been adapted. So you may think, well, I've read this book and that's not what it says, but it will have been adapted for the level. And they have to just give some short answers to prompts. We'll have a look at the kind of question that goes with it at the end. But students don't need to have any knowledge of the work. They just need to be aware that it's a literary text. And you can see already, can't you, in that one, we've got a conversation happening. We've got so there's dialogue happening in there, which we wouldn't necessarily see in other task types. And there will be some of those other sort of features of literature that they should be familiar with from reading in their own language. But other than that, the language used will be on a level that's appropriate for the qualification, and it will be simplified to a level that makes it a good test. And it will also work around the vocabulary on the list as well, So in fact, there is nothing specific to prepare with literary texts, just for your students to understand that it is a literary text. And so it's part of a narrative. There would have been something that's happened before and something that's happened afterwards. We're going to find characters, we might find dialogue, we might find those features. And the task looks like that. So they give short answers. 10 marks are available for this task. And it's just a sort of note-taking format that looks like that. Okay. So if we have a look at question 5 now. So question 5 is, again, what you see we're picking up, we're getting a longer passage now. This is sort of coming towards the end of the reading section. So we're asking for more reading, we're asking for more extended reading, we're expecting reading of a longer passage that isn't subdivided with bullet points or with subheadings or anything like that. So a little bit less signposting. And for that one, then students are required to produce free response answers. So there are 10 marks for this. Now, one of the things, again, I will sort of come back to this business about whether they need to manipulate language in order to answer the questions. What we do is we give marks for evidence of reliable comprehension, reliable evidence of comprehension. So if you think they've understood and they've expressed their answer fairly concisely, whether it's lifted from the text or not, they will get the mark, okay? If candidates transcribe a long chunk from the text, the examiner then doesn't know whether the candidate has understood or whether they've just located where they think the answer might be and copied something out. So we're looking for that evidence of comprehension. And once that evidence of comprehension is there, they get the mark. And if it isn't, they don't. So do please guide your candidates just to try and answer in a concise way. It doesn't matter if it's lifted from the text, but they need to answer in a concise way. Notice as well that we have plenty of writing space, but 1 mark, 1 detail, 2 marks, 2 details. So some of those are 2-mark questions. Again, it's a good idea for candidates to try to make very clear where it's a 2-mark question, a 2-detail question, make their 2 details clear to the examiner. And you know, it's not for me to suggest this. If I were a candidate doing that, I would write, you know, 1, 2 or bullet points or something just to make absolutely clear what your intended 2 answers are. Candidates only have 1 opportunity to communicate with the examiner, so they need to use it well and make sure that they communicate their answers clearly. So that was that question. It's a 10-mark question, so quite a lot to do there. Okay. Now, we're going to have a look at writing now. In both listening and reading, in your packs of information, there are some marking activities, and I don't think we're going to have time to deal with those in the session today. But those are worth doing. They're worth taking your time, particularly if you're new to dealing with this qualification. It's all new to you. Do spend a bit of time to have a look at those marking activities. So we're going to have a look now at the writing paper and the writing tasks. Okay, so to remind you then, we have reading and writing paper. It's paper 2. So reading is 40 marks, writing is 40 marks, an hour and 45 minutes. But we're looking now at the writing bit. So the writing grammar, question 6, question 7, and question 8. So question 6 is the short writing task. It's actually 60 to 75 words. I apologize, it says 80 to 75, but it's 60 to 75. We need to correct that the next time I do this presentation. Question 7 is the 130 to 150 word task, and question 8 is the grammar based. So let's just have a look here again at what the task looks like. So this is the example of question 6. Okay, so candidates are required to write about the family. They need to mention persons, argument, yesterday, and activities. Okay, and it says write a response of 60 to 75 words in French on the subject of your family. Okay, so they're told what they have to write about, and they're told you must use the words above. Okay, so those words need to be included in what they write. Okay. And they need to be included verbatim and not changed. Okay, so you know, person, plural, and we need plural in what they write. Activité, plural, and we need plural in what they write. Okay, so it's important that they put those words into what they write. So they need to use those words. Okay, if it were me as a student, I would encourage them to put the word in and underline it so the examiner can see it. But nevertheless, they need to go in however they go in, because examiners will be looking to make sure that those words are included. Okay, so that's an important sort of technical requirement that is there, and you need to just really kind of encourage you students to do that and to make sure that the words are included. Okay. Now, if we look at what candidates are getting marks for in this 60 to 75 words, and remember what I was saying as well about kind of, you know, we're 15 to 18 words, something about, you know, kind of try to spread the content across the words and the ideas, the things that those things are suggesting, so that we get that variety of content, and also that we get the variety of linguistic knowledge and accuracy, get the variety of vocabulary and grammar. So what do they get the marks for? So there are 5 marks each for the content and communication and for the linguistic knowledge and accuracy. When we mark writing, we give a little bit more importance, and you will see as we talk about the speaking marks, we give a bit more importance to the linguistic knowledge and accuracy, to the language, than we do to the content and communication. And when we mark speaking, we're more interested in content and communication. So for writing here, we're looking at 50-50. So it's a 10-mark question, 5 marks for communication content, which we'll look at here, and then 5 marks for linguistic knowledge and accuracy. That balance is tipped a little, you'll see when we get into speaking. So for 5 marks, a detailed and detailed and fully relevant response to the task. Okay, so detailed and fully relevant shows a clear ability to express ideas and opinions and to describe or inform as appropriate to the task. Coherent with logical flow and sequence of ideas. Okay, so they're given those 4 bullet point, four words. They need to fit those 4 words into a task. The whole thing in this case would need to be about the family. Okay. And there are certain things as well that they need to do. So we want detail and relevance. So that means sticking to the task. We want them to give ideas and opinions, and we want them to describe or inform. So again, making sure that they have the language to do those things in a simple way, but that those things are there. And we also want it to have a sort of logical flow and for there to be a sequence of ideas. Okay, and that would give them the 5 marks. Just sort of talking about how the mark schemes work generally, in that particular mark scheme that you see in front of you, and it's a feature of Pearson, that the things that we're looking for will be the same things in each box, but we look for, as we go down the marks, we expect to see a little bit gradually less of them. Okay, so look, for example, in at number 5 there, it says detailed and fully relevant response, but in 4 it says some detail and mostly relevant. In 3, the response contains some relevant information with occasional use of detail. 2, the response contains little relevant information with limited use of detail, and 1 isolated example. So those kind of qualifier words are important as you're sort of looking at the how you apply the mark scheme. We also need to be mindful that question 6 targets the lower grades. So actually, we're not demanding anything like as much in question 6 as we would do in question 7 for the top mark. But just keep your eye on the way the marks seem to work in terms of that kind of qualifying language. Okay, the elements that we're looking for will be the same elements, but we have more of them at the top end and fewer of them at the bottom end. Linguistic knowledge and accuracy looks like that. Okay, and so here for the 5 marks uses a range of vocabulary and grammatical structures, language manipulated to produce fluent sentences, and very accurate with only isolated minor errors, spellings, genders, and agreements. Okay, a minor error tends to be the sort of thing where communication is still achieved. You can understand what they said, but there's an error, and a major error would be something that results in a real breakdown of communication, where you really either can't understand or you would struggle to understand. And that's a sort of example of a candidate response. You know, look, that's an interesting, it's what I was saying to you. Look, the candidate has written the right sort of amount of words. They've sensibly, nobody tells you have to, but they've underlined the words. Okay. So that's useful that they kind of got those things in there as far as they've been able to do. Okay, so you get that idea. You see the 4 words underlined, and we've got a nice sort of fairly coherent response. And in terms of the level of the task, that's a 10 out of 10 response. They get 5 marks for communication and 5 marks for linguistic knowledge and accuracy, just keeping in mind that this is a task that's targeted at the lower grades. Okay, and so for those of you able to read French, that's the sort of level that we're looking at. And I think there are examples for Spanish and German in the pack that you will find useful if those are your languages. So if we just look at what the examiner's commentary was about that text, it said the candidate was awarded 10 out of 10, as I mentioned. So 5 for each of the 2 categories. Writing is clear and coherent. They've covered all 4 words. There's details, there's some opinions, it's clear. Got a good range of vocabulary and structures, accurate with just minor errors, fluent, it reads well. Candidate has underlined the 4 stimulus words. This is good practice as it helps to ensure that none are left out. So that's a useful kind of training thing to be doing with your students as you get them used to doing the exam and practicing this task. And because this is a task aimed at grades 1 to 4, they're not expected to produce extended or complex language. Okay, so for that, even if you've got really able candidates, it's good advice for them to keep it simple and straightforward for question 6. The time to show off your best language is in question 7, because that's where we're looking at the top grades and it's differentiated, it's targeted at the top grades. And so really save all your best phrases and all of your most sophisticated language for there, and try and keep it fairly simple in question 6 as far as you possibly can. A question that sometimes arises is whether it's okay for candidates to use some of the same words and phrases in both question 6 and question 7. And yes, each one is marked separately. So, and they might not even be marked by the same examiner. So each one is marked separately. So if you have some really nice phrasing, I'd like to use that in question 6, but can I use it again in question 7? The answer is yes, you can. Now, question 7 looks like that then. So candidates for question 7 have to choose one of 3 particular options. So the first thing they need to do is to decide what it is they want to do. Okay, So in each case, they're given a task. So the first one says, write an email to your friend about your birthday. You must mention the following points. The second one, write an article about media. You must mention the following points. And C, write a blog about traditions. You must mention the following points. Okay, so a couple of things to say. We're not too concerned about, whether the email has a sort of dear something, so that we don't specifically give marks for the letter etiquette or any of that kind of thing. So the marks go really for dealing with the 4 bullet points, but they are told here, you must mention the following points. So in order to stand a chance of getting full marks certainly for communication and content, they must deal with all 4 of those points. And of course, good practice is to kind of write about the same amount about each point. You'll also notice that these questions are targeting particular ideas and time frames. So for the first one, it says you can write an email to your friend about your birthday. So we're looking at the importance of celebrating your birthday, how you have prepared or how you prepared your last birthday party, if you prefer to receive money or presents, and what you will do for your next birthday. So we're looking for past and future. We're looking for opinion in there, the importance of something, and we're looking for description. Okay, so all of those things are important, and each of those bullet points targets a particular area of content that examiners will be looking to see, although of course candidates decide what they write, and it also targets particular areas of language. So past and future time frame are requirements there. In question 6, you can, it's absolutely fine. You can put the past or future if you want to, but nobody says you have to. But here, those are requirements. So if we look at the mark scheme tells you what it is the candidate should have referred to. And here, if we have a look at the mark schemes for communication and content, and then in a moment, linguistic knowledge and accuracy. This time, 10 marks for each of those. Okay, so 10 marks for each of those categories. 5 marks it was in question 6, 10 marks in question 7. For the 9 to 10 mark box for communication and content, then it says the response shows an excellent ability to express ideas in a logical sequence, and errors do not interfere with comprehension for a sympathetic native speaker. So good ideas, clearly expressed. The response is entirely coherent, and while there may be minor ambiguities or digression from the theme, the response is confident, fluent, pertinent, and purposeful. Okay, so again, the same features that we mentioned before. You'll see those categories within the bullet points within the mark scheme kind of decreasing as we move down the mark bands. But those are the things we're looking for communication and content. And notice things like the response is entirely coherent, okay, and we're looking for and pertinent, because of course they are told they must include those things from the bullet points. Okay, so those are a requirement. And then when we look at the mark scheme for the linguistic knowledge and accuracy, we're looking for excellent range of vocabulary and grammatical structures, secure use of at least 3 tenses, some complex lexical items, and no noticeable repetition. Okay, so, and that means repetition within the piece. It doesn't mean that you can't repeat something that you might already have used in question 6. So that was, sometimes it's a question we get asked. And we see very strong evidence of correct spelling, verb formation, gender agreement, but nevertheless, doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Okay, And again, you'll notice those decreasing qualifying words. Okay, so 9 to 10 starts with excellent, 7 to 8 good, 5 to 6 satisfactory, 3 to 4 narrow, and 1 to 2 very limited. So the categories of kind of access to the mark scheme are consistent, but actually what we're seeing is different ways of reaching those with those bits of qualifying language. So those are in the mark scheme, the things that examiners are looking for, the range of grammatical structures and vocabulary, and the accuracy. Okay, so are the two key things that we're looking for. Now, in your pack of materials, there are some exemplar, and I think these are, unless you've got quite a big screen, though, that might be a little bit tricky for you to read, but we'll give you just a brief second just to have a little scan through if you can. But otherwise, if you're teaching a different language or you don't read French, there are exemplars provided for you in the pack, and those are maybe something that is something that we you can look at after the event today. But you see a passage there. One of the things that stands out there is that we're getting a little bit of paragraphing. We're getting things sort of there's some elements of organization. And for those of you who are French teachers, you get an idea of the sort of level, and it continued there. And again, this is something that will hit the top level of requirement for this qualification. So that level of language that you briefly had a look at there gave 10 out of 10 for communication and content and 10 out of 10 for linguistic knowledge and accuracy. And we're told that the candidate provides in-depth information pertinent to the question subject, including extended sequences of writing. Linguistically, the candidate has skillfully employed a range of grammatical structures, incorporating some complex constructions, and successfully referred to past, present, and future timeframes. Just as we start to talk about other things that Pearson offers, one of the things that, of course, we do is this results plus. So the examiner's reports will have exemplars like the one you saw, with a little commentary like this that explains and exemplifies the markings. So there is something there that you can work on, and you can show those. You can even use those and do some activities with your students in order to kind of make sure that your marking is in line with the marking that the examiners are doing. So again, if you're new to the qualification, working out that getting clear about the level is really important, because that enables you to target your teaching, and particularly this is particularly true for productive skills, for speaking and writing. You know, how much do we need to do for the 10 marks, because that enables you, I think, to make good use of your lesson time, so that we don't overteach sometimes and into a narrower band of language, or that we don't underteach, so that students are not sufficiently ready to deal with what they need to do. Keep your eye, as well as teachers, on that idea of variety of grammatical structures and variety of vocabulary. When we talk about variety of structures, for example, when we do something where the candidate needs to write about a past time frame, it's a good idea maybe to encourage your candidates to use different persons of the verb, and maybe to use some simple past and also some imperfect, and we might get things like a pluperfect in there as well, so that the time frame isn't to be you know, well demonstrated at the highest level of the mark scheme. We're not looking for that to apparently have come simply from memory. They don't just say I went. Okay, so we might want I and he and they, and we might want to have, you know, a couple of different past tenses with future, you know, I and we and he and they, would be good. And then perhaps we might have if it's a language like French and Spanish, where you've got a sort of periphrastic future, you've got a future with the verb to go, and then you've got future tense. Maybe let's have one of each of those demonstrated. So it's that's what we sort of mean really by kind of variety. And when we talk about variety of vocabulary as well, sometimes with the text, just encouraging students to acquire a little bit of vocabulary that's a personalized repertoire of vocabulary. When they write about a place they went to, they quite often say, we went to the park and we played football with my friends. But actually, if they go somewhere different, they go to the bowling alley and they do something different there, and they go with somebody, they go with their cousins, for example, we've again got that little bit of variety included only in a simple way, but it just lifts the writing and it avoids that tendency to repetition. And you notice the mark schemes referred to repetition. I mean, I'm chattering on now about things that perhaps go beyond the scope of this presentation this morning. Now, just through kind of pressure of time, the next activity which we would normally ask you to do is in the pack of exemplars, but we'll kind of leave that with you for after the event today. But you will see some exemplars for question 7 in your pack, and those are really useful things to work on, because you've got examiner commentary as well, just to understand. And what you're really looking for is understanding the level, and you're looking, remember, for the variety of vocabulary and the variety of grammatical structure. I'm going to move on now just to talk to you about question 8. So question 8 now is the grammar question. And so question 8, there are 10 marks available for question 8. And what students have is a passage that looks like that. And you'll see A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. And in the square brackets, there is an unmarked form of a verb or an adjective. They're only verbs or adjectives. And what students need to do is to read the passage and the sentences and work out how they are going to inflect that word in square brackets or not, because it isn't always necessary to inflect the verb. So I think in terms of encouraging them to work out what they have to do, the first step is to identify which are the verbs and which are the adjectives. And in most of the languages that we're teaching, that will be clear. So that would be the first thing that they could usefully do, just to go through before they even start reading. And then they need to look at the grammatical support that sits around those words. So if it's a verb, can we find the subject of the verb? What is the subject of the verb? And is there any information about the tense of the verb? Okay, because you will see there in the French, it starts actuellement. So currently, okay, now. So that implies that we're looking for a present tense, doesn't it? Okay, if it said in the past, then we know we're going for a past form, etc. So that strategy, it's also then to look at the adjectives and can we find the noun it agrees with, okay? And remember sometimes that that adjective might, there might be a noun there, but sometimes there might be a pronoun there. It might say they, okay? And so we have to work out who they are. And that might include reading back a line to know that they were two female persons and so on. So just making sure really that your students have that set of strategies. Is it a noun or is it a verb or an adjective, first of all? If it's a verb, what's the subject? If it's an adjective, what noun or pronoun is it describing? and then they need to think about how they manipulate that word. And also just for them to understand that not all of those will need to have have any manipulation at all. So sometimes they can just stay as they are. Okay, that's the grammar test. Those again are the sort of texts that you can develop yourself if you take some of the reading passages and we blank out some of the words and we give them the words underneath and just see, you know, you can sort of do those and things and make them appear. But it's a good activity for making sure that they also develop their grammatical linguistic control really for writing and for speaking. And our mark scheme will look like that. And so that's the sort of thing we're expecting our students to come up with. Obviously, you see there, for example, in 8I, that we've got a future tense, but obviously as students who put a future tense with a periphrastic future, the would also get the mark there. And sometimes there may be a little bit of room for maneuver with little errors, and you see there in 8D, for example, that we are generously accepting those things which are unambiguous in the minds of a French person. There isn't any ambiguity about those particularly. They're just very minor errors, and those could be accepted. Okay. And so there we go. We've got a kind of an example from some candidate work. That's candidate that got 8 out of 10 there, and you know, you can see the answers if you were looking at. I flipped through very quickly, I know, but answers C and E were incorrect. And otherwise, they'd done it successfully. Okay, and you know, just there's a little bit of information there about the future tense. You know, okay, so in French and Spanish, where the future is tested, the following applies. If the infinitive is given in the brackets, the simple future is required. So we should be encouraging them to have simple future. If the near future is targeted, the auxiliary will be given in the brackets. You know, so we put the aller or the ir. And then they have to do that kind of future. Okay, so just again making sure that your students understand the format that we're asking them to do. So where it's future, they should be putting in future tense in French or Spanish. Okay, good. Now we're going to come on to the bit where we do need to, you know, really rely on our teachers who are making, you know, conducting the tests effectively and well. And we're going to talk about the speaking. So I'm going to give you some information about the speaking, and do remember that there will be specific training for those of you who are conducting the speaking exam. We've done one session already this year, and I think probably the recordings of those sessions will be available on the website as well. But there will be more opportunities to join that. So certainly before you conduct your first set of speaking exams, if you're new to Pearson, I really would recommend that you attend the speaking training, because it's the one area where if you make a mistake and you don't conduct the test correctly, your candidates can be disadvantaged, and it's important that we kind of make sure we get those things right, you know, on their behalf, really. Okay, so to remind you, quick recap, then we've got this speaking test, 40 marks, 8 to 10 minutes. Task A, candidates respond to questions on a picture of their choice, and then task B, it's the 2 conversations. Now, the timings are designed really for 2 to 3 minutes of questions about their picture, 3 to 3.5 minutes then about each of the spontaneous discussion topics that they take part in. So if we just have a bit of a think about the picture-based discussion. Now, the candidates need to choose an appropriate picture. And the picture needs to have people, it needs to have a location, and we also need interaction between the people. So the people need to be doing something. There needs to be some sort of activity going on between the people in the picture. So as a teacher, you need to be practicing doing those picture tasks, but also making sure that your students are clear about the kind of picture that they need to have. And there are lots of examples on the website. There are exemplar out there, so you can find those things. But just it starts with making sure that the choice of picture is appropriate. So you, as the teacher examiner, need to ask the candidates 5 questions. Okay? And there are 5 types of questioning that you need to cover, and you need to ask 1 question from each type. So just to be clear, they choose their picture. You will need a copy of their picture, and you will need to have done some preparation to make sure that you have prepared some questions that you can ask them smoothly about the picture. So the first question type is a description of what's in the picture. So you're just going to say to them, what's in your picture? Tell me about your picture. Okay, so we're going to describe your picture, please. Okay, and they do that description. They talk about what's in the picture. And then you need to ask them a specific factual piece of information about what's in the picture. Okay, so that's a specific, like, what are these people doing? What's in the background? What's in the foreground? Okay, so we're asking them to give you some specific factual information. But be careful when you do that, because what we don't want is to have what's in the background and they just say trees. Okay, we need to target a question so that it gives them a little bit more to say than a single word answer. Okay. And as you go through this test, you need to be listening very carefully, because if in their description of the picture, they've already said what's in the background of the picture, that means that your second question will need to be something else. So because it has a spontaneous element in the moment, you will need to be prepared to adjust your questioning in response to their responses to you. And then we ask, third question is a past or future hypothesis. So that's what do you think these people have just done? What do you think these people are going to do? What has just happened? What do you think will happen next? Okay, so it's a what do you think, and it's a past or future hypothesis. Okay, and then we're going to ask them a question that's about an opinion about the picture. Okay, so what do you think of what they're doing? What do you think of what they're wearing? What do you think of that particular place? Okay, so we're going to ask an opinion about their picture. And question 5 is an evaluative question. So question 5 moves slightly away from the picture, and question 5 asks students to evaluate the theme of what they're seeing in the picture. So if you imagine that the picture's a football game, your question 5 might be, do you think sport is important for young people? Okay, so question 5 is an evaluative question that gives them that opportunity to give their opinion justification about the theme of the picture rather than the actual content. So just to be clear, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are about the content of the picture, and question 5 is about the extending out to the wider theme of the picture. Okay, and you only ask those 5 questions. But if you think student hasn't told you quite enough, you can use some prompts, and each language has its own prompts, but broadly those are why not, anything else, and is that all? Okay, so those are allowable prompts. But you mustn't ask any supplementary questions. You don't step outside those 5 questions. And you also mustn't use other prompts either. Okay, so you're not allowed to lead the witness. You're not allowed to ask supplementary questions that suggest a particular answer. Now, your students, as they prepare their picture, can have this information on this slide. There's no secret about that, so that they can prepare their description of the picture. So they can have that and they can memorize that. That's absolutely fine. They ought to have a look at different elements of the picture and think, okay, I might get asked something about the people, I might get asked something about the place, I might get asked something about the activities they're doing, and they could get themselves prepared to talk about some of those specific factual elements of the picture. They can get themselves prepared and thinking about the past or future hypothesis. They won't know which one you're going to ask them, but it's, you know, what's just happened or what's going to happen next. What has this person done before they came here? What are they going to do afterwards? So those looking at their picture, understanding how the task works, they can get themselves prepared. Opinions about the picture, well, they know what's in the picture, so they need to think about what their opinions are about the different elements of the picture. And then they can think about what the overall theme of their picture is, and think about what evaluative questions they might get there. And obviously, as you're teaching them, you need to be practicing lots of this stuff with them. In terms of our mark scheme, our mark schemes are a little bit different. Now, you remember what I said when we were looking at writing, that the 2 categories, communication and content, and linguistic knowledge and accuracy, in writing are half and half. But in speaking, they are tipped towards communication and content. So we give more emphasis to communication and content than we do to linguistic knowledge and accuracy. So for this particular task, candidates respond to questions with consistently fluent and developed responses. We've seen consistently effective adaptation of language to describe, narrate, and inform in response to questions. Candidates are expressing opinions with ease and giving fully developed justification, and pronunciation and intonation are consistently accurate and intelligible. They don't need to be perfect. Okay, we're not expecting native speaker standards of language, just consistently accurate and intelligible. A native speaker could understand without too much difficulty what the candidate is saying there for those 7 to 8 marks. Okay, and you know, just again the same things that I was talking about the mark schemes earlier on. We responds to questions with consistently fluent and developed responses for 7 to 8. Responds to questions with frequently developed responses, only occasional hesitation and occasional prompting necessary. Okay, so there we're sort of seeing actually in the 7 to 8 box, did they just talk? But in the 5 to 6 box, has the teacher occasionally need to say what else and what more do you think? Okay, and so if we're seeing quite a bit of that, sort of a bit of hesitation and that prompting going on, it tends to pull us towards the 5-6 box in that particular area of the mark scheme. Okay, so and as I mentioned, then look, 4 marks are available. Okay, so it's 8 and 4 here. So for linguistic knowledge and accuracy, less important in speaking than it was in writing, consistently accurate grammatical structures, successful references to past, present, and or future events in response to the questions. Responses are fully coherent and any errors don't hinder the clarity of communication. When your candidates do their description of the picture, there isn't any reason that they don't put some past or future in there as well. Listen out for it, because sometimes they do, and it's important then that when you ask them their past or future hypothesis question, you ask them for something different, some different information, so that we don't put them in the position of repeating the same thing again. But quite often they quite like to put a bit of past and future into that description, because they think, well, I've done it then. I've shown a bit of ability to do that. So it's not a bad thing to do, but one thing we just need to ask you to do as teachers is to be attentive to what they say, because if they've already said it, you will need to adapt your question to elicit something different from them. So in your pack of information, we've got a listening, a speaking task that you can listen to. Now, we're going to see, we're not going to sort of spend the time, I think, today, because I think we're going to run out of time if we do it. And I'm conscious that not everybody will speak the same language, so it may not be the ideal thing for you to do, but it's again something that for part of your own training, do please listen afterwards. You'll have a copy of the PowerPoint. You can go back and have a listen with your students as well. So what you were listening for is, using those grids that we saw, is the picture appropriate? Does it look like the right sort of picture? Are we seeing a people, a location, and interaction? Well, you look at the picture, yes, we are seeing that, aren't we? And then listening to the 5 question types that the teacher examiner asks, and whether they use only the allowed prompts. And the one that you will listen to there, the examiner's comments also are clearly written. You can see there's an explanation, justification of why the marks that are given are given. Okay. We're going to have a look now at the conversation task and the conversation topics. So for this part of the test, the Pearson will provide you with a randomization grid. So for each candidate, you'll be told which is task B and which is task C. So you need to follow that grid and make sure that you stick very carefully to that. So you don't choose the topics of conversation for them. Although you are choosing the questions, you will know what they can deal with. And as you are doing this conversation part of the test, remember that there are some marks available for the spontaneity of what they say. So that's important to kind of keep that in mind. So we know that students will have prepared, and they'll have prepared some questions and answers in advance and all of that sort of thing. But there are marks for spontaneity. So you need to run the test in such a way that it gives them the opportunity to highlight, the level of spontaneity that they can produce, which is appropriate to them. And because we will have candidates of all abilities from grade 1 up to grade 9 doing this part of the test, you should aim to adapt and differentiate your questioning appropriate to those students. So, sometimes with a weaker student, you're going to ask for quite a lot of answers, quite a lot of questions with quite short answers. And you might want to support them with why and when did that happen and who was there. And so to maintain the flow of those conversations is important for those students, but your questioning will need to support them to show the ceiling of their performance. So we want to see how good they can be. Okay, if you've got more able candidates, we might want to ask increasingly open questions that give them that opportunity to showcase what they can do. So teacher examiners should ask open questions. At the beginning, you would always ask them a question, tell me about, talk to me a little bit about, okay, what do you think of? Okay, so we give them an invitation to do that. The most able candidates will pick it up and run with it, and the weaker candidates will then need a level of support as they go through, just to keep them talking and keep it going and keep them moving forward. So that information about asking questions at a level appropriate to the candidate's ability is really important. Please also remember that it's a conversation, so you need to be aiming to link a good number of your questions. I mean, you can change the subject, but link them back to the previous response as far as possible. You need to elicit a range of tenses, structures, and vocabulary, elicit opinions and justifications, and provide candidates with that opportunity to expand. Okay. Please respect the timings, it's most important, and also examiners will stop marking after the time expires. So actually, if the test runs on too long, you're doing your candidates no favours because that part of the test won't be assessed. But we're looking for 3 to 3.5 minutes on each of the conversation topics. Okay, so conversation should look like that. Key things then: stick to the time, differentiate according to the candidate's ability, and remember that we're trying to get that range of tenses from them. And we're going to have a look at the mark scheme now. So as we look through the mark scheme, you'll see kind of how the things that I'm talking about there are assessed and what we need to be doing with them. So we've got 3 mark grids this time. Okay, but still the biggest chunk of the marks goes for communication and content. So we're looking for 12 marks, communicates detailed information relevant to the topics and questions, consistently extended sequences of speech, consistently uses language creatively to express and justify a wide variety of individual thoughts, ideas, and opinions, consistently uses a wide variety of vocabulary, including in uncommon language, to consistently vary expression for different purposes, and pronunciation and intonation are consistently accurate and intelligible. So consistency, we're looking for lots of detail. We're looking for, when we say use language creatively, it might be thoughts like it, you know, it's the one where the candidate, this always reminds me of, you know, and that's a sort of creative idea, creative use of the language, for example, and so on. The second mark grid then is 8 marks, which are available for interaction and spontaneity. So this is where pre-learnt, pre-memorized, totally pre-learnt and totally memorized conversations really don't work. Okay, so we're looking for the candidate to respond spontaneously and with ease to the questions, resulting in natural interaction. You can also help the naturalness of that interaction. Sometimes if you think that they're starting to recite a lot of pre-learned information, dive in and ask them, when did that happen, or who was there, or try to interrupt that flow and generate that natural interaction for them. Interaction also means that maybe they ask you some questions, you know, what do you think? Do you agree? Okay, that's not a bad thing for students to do, to be showing that interaction. Consistently able to initiate and develop the conversation independently. So this is where you say, you know, what did you think of the film? And we kind of say, it was good, I liked it. Okay? But that's not developing the conversation. So actually they need to not just always answer the question that's asked, but also the wider implications of it, and expand on what they say for the most able candidates. And able to sustain communication throughout, rephrasing, repair strategies, etc. Okay, so whatever they're doing that's keeping that conversation going and flowing, if they're doing those things, then that's really where we're looking for that 7 to 8 mark band. And the final category, of course, is the linguistic knowledge of accuracy. And this is where we're looking for them to manipulate a wide variety of grammatical features. We're looking for complex structures, and some of those complex structures are exemplified in the specification. But complex at a B1 level, we're not talking about kind of degree level language here, keep in mind. We're not talking about native speaker complexity, we're talking about second language learner complexity. we're looking for consistently accurate grammatical structures, consistently successful references to past, present, and future events. So this is where, again, you as the teacher examiner need to give them the opportunities. We need to be asking them past and future questions. And we're also looking for coherence and that errors don't hinder the clarity of opinion. Okay, and again, there are exemplar to listen to after the event today, and examiners' comments, which are, and you see how copious really those examiner comments are. Okay. Now that kind of brings us to the end of a very, very extended and hopefully very detailed examination of the qualification and the things that you need to do from a point of view of understanding the content of it and also understanding the assessment of it. I'm going to just talk you through now for a few moments about, kind of talk to you a little bit about the support that you can get from Pearson. And then what I'll do is I'll open up the chat and we'll pick up on any questions that you might have. If you already put a question in and I haven't seen it, do please ask it again, but your opportunity will come in a moment to pick up on some questions. So what we're sort of hoping we do is really try to support you as teachers at each stage of the qualification. One of the features of Pearson really is that we're an awarding organisation. We're an exam board, but we're also a learning organisation, and so actually we support not just with the qualification sample assessment, but also through published resources and pointing you in the direction of training and so on. So it's a kind of hopefully one-stop shop for everything you need to deliver this course. Now, make sure that you're familiar with the website. If you don't, if you haven't looked at the website yet, do please go on there. So you need to just do a search for International GCSE French 2017, Spanish 2017, German 2017, Pearson. You'll find a landing page that looks like that. And so on that landing page, you've got all sorts of things that you might want to have a look at and explore. There isn't anything secret about it either, so I think it's quite a good thing just from almost a kind of developing a bit of metacognition in your students, you know, just to encourage them to go there and have a look. So you'll find on the webpage a copy of the specification. You'll also find all of the past papers, but just to note that the most recent past papers will always be locked, and you simply get that little padlock symbol. And it's not high-level security, it's low-level security, but your exams officer will be able to provide you with an unlock the padlock there to be able to get in and unlock the papers for the most recent series. But it does just stop your students having a look and, you know, if you're going to do a mock exam, finding the answers or finding the questions. So it maintains that sort of low-level security of the assessment. But the ones from earlier years, yes, they will be able to have a look at. And we would sort of encourage students to do those things and to really sort of get into understanding how the papers work, how the questions work. You'll also find a section with teaching and learning materials. So there's a whole lot of material there. There will be schemes of work, there's skills mapping, you'll find the vocabulary list, there's a section with teacher support as well. And you'll also find the past training content. So within the past training content tab, you'll find the recordings and the information from all sorts of past training events that we're doing, and this one will land there at some point as well, so that you can go back in and you can listen again. And if there are areas where you think I need a bit of training on that, you can listen to it. You can even listen to it and use some of those things with your students as well. So all of those things are available to you to use and work on independently yourselves as well. So everything we do, we kind of prize really the transparency and the availability of all of the information that we provide you with. It's also worth mentioning that we're happy to offer some bespoke training, you know, so sometimes we have teacher centres who want to have a, you know, an hour's session online to look at a particular issue, a particular paper, a particular something, and you can contact us to kind of ask for that. If we just flick back, in that landing page, you'll see Rebecca Waker, who's the person who looks after all of our centre support, or at least her team looks after all of our centre support for languages. And so there's an email address there, which you can just about see, that says teachinglanguages@pearson.com, and there's a phone number as well. And so if you do want to organize any kind of training, want to do anything, they need any particular support, that's really the place to go to. And you can sign up for some updates and so on as well. I'll mention also to you, if you're new to Pearson Results Plus, so this gives you detailed analysis of your students' performance. You can sort of identify topics and skills and you know, questions that they did well with, and areas where they were struggling a little bit, because of course all of the marking now is done online, and so we are able to gather all of that. Those data in the background, and so just again, your exams officer will be able to set you up with access to Results Plus for your students. But it's interesting just to know, you know, you will inevitably sort of know what their final grade is, but it's just useful to know if there's a particular, if sort of question 6 on listening is something that you think, well, actually a lot of our students fell down on that, there's something there that you can find to think, well, actually, what is my strategy for improving that for the future? So Results Plus, you know, they sit the paper, they're scanned, they're marked, and then we can share those performance reports with schools. I mentioned Exam Wizard is not available for all subjects, but for those of you who teach a subject where it is, it enables you to pull together questions to make exam papers. I'll talk to you as well very briefly about access to scripts. So you can get access to your candidates' marked work as well. So if you want to see how a particular student did, we have that access to scripts service. And again, that's available through the Pearson website, or your exams officer will be able to do all of that and do that for you. Our textbooks, you've absolutely no requirement to use a Pearson textbook. I mean, but we do publish textbooks that support this qualification, and so those are there. And pearson.com/international-schools is the place to have a look for those textbooks. And those of you who are teaching outside the UK, you'll have regional development manager supports in your regions, and those Pearson representatives will be able to guide you there as well, in terms of kind of the resources, the material that's available to support you in supporting your students' success with the qualifications. Our subject partner support, so I mentioned earlier on, is Rebecca, and Rebecca's, I don't know quite how she manages to do it really, because they support huge numbers of schools, and she will always get back to you with an answer. So do email teachinglanguages@pearson.com if you need an answer rapidly and feel like phoning 9 to 5 UK time. You can do that on that phone number. And also do please sign up for the support updates, because I think those are, again, useful things to make sure that you have, in case there are any change, in case there's anything that you need to know about. And we'll just mention as well the Professional Development Academy. So again, you have a look at the Professional Development Academy. So there are things to do with kind of getting ready to teach and understanding assessment and improving delivery. So webinars and things that happen through the year, but then also more advanced training about exam insights, enhancing teaching through exam insights, marking of accuracy and insight and so on. So those professional development opportunities are also offered. A lot of them also free of charge as well. So again, we hope we kind of give you the support you need to deliver the qualification effectively. Now we come to the bit where I'm going to see if we can pick up on some questions. I'm going to we're just going to have I'm going to have a little look through the questions that if anything came up. But if it didn't do, this is now your moment if you do have questions that you need to so question about whether there's any plans to update the French GCSE in line with other UK exam boards. No, international is separate, Christine. So that will be there is no plan at the moment to update international. International will stay as we understand it the same. But yes, things like dictation and reading aloud have been introduced to the national qualification, but so far we're not expecting any updates to international. And normally there would be a good year's notice of any of those changes to enable teachers to prepare. So Samaya says students can lift from the text, but they need to manipulate the language as well to fit the answer. Yeah, they need to just, Samaya, they need to just answer the question. So provided they've answered the question and their answer is clear, they don't need to manipulate the language beyond that. But obviously, if the question is, what does he do on Saturdays? And they write, I go to the market, that's not a clear and unambiguous answer to that question. So we're not forcing manipulation. We just want them to answer the question. But obviously, if they do it in a way that means what they've said isn't an answer to the question, then the marks, we haven't got comprehension achieved. They've just copied from the text. So in the writing task before, a question about how many times do they need to include the word? No, only once. They only need to include them once, but they could put it more than once. It doesn't matter, but usually we would just expect them to do it once. Is it always present in past tense for the 60 to 70 words, or can it be present in future? I think it could be present in future. So they should be prepared to do a little bit of past, present, and future for that task. Have a look through, because these things sometimes are language specific. Have a look through at the sample assessments and at the past papers for your particular subject. And once you see that pattern will persist. Okay. So are there 60 to 75 and the 130 marked by the same person or separate? So I think this is I think I kind of touched on this. No, they're marked separately. They're not necessarily marked by the same person. They might be and they might not be, but they can repeat the same quality structures in both tasks. That's absolutely fine. So each one is marked separately. So they're certainly not going to lose any marks because they've used the same structure twice. So do we provide a list of key questions, and are they allowed to bring a mind map with vocabulary and notes into the exam. So no, we don't provide a list of key questions because what we're asking you to do for part B and part C of the conversation is to facilitate spontaneous and natural interaction. So that would prevent spontaneity. But your main approach really is going to be to ask them an open question. Tell me a bit about, let's talk about, what do you think about? Give them an opportunity to talk, listen, and then pick up on some details of what they say to ask further questions. So in terms of your conversation strategy, it's that, but they're not allowed to bring mind maps or anything with them into the exam. No, the picture task, they have their picture, but they can't have other support materials with them. Can they use AI to produce their picture? Yeah, that's absolutely fine. And a lot of students are sort of starting to do that now. There isn't any problem with that. That's absolutely fine. And do they need to use 2 or 3 tenses for task A? They should really be using 2 tenses at least, because we want a past or future hypothesis. So it's past or future, and not necessarily both. But very typically, the more able students will also use a 3rd tense somewhere in their evaluation question or in their picture description, but minimum 2 tenses. AI to be used. Is results plus free to school? Yes, it's free. Yeah. Yeah, so everything that's available with Pearson is free to use. Okay, so yeah, that's it. Do we have any textbooks for Swahili? Do you know, we don't, I'm afraid, and I don't believe that's supported at the moment. Is it possible to buy the answers? And for the textbooks, is it possible to buy the answers and transcripts? Yes. If you look at the website for the textbook, yes, all of that will, the teaching pack will be there. There will be the textbook, the recording, and the answers and transcripts are there. And your regional development manager, your how to monitor the regions across the world, will be able to guide you as to where to find those things. If not, please contact the teaching languages at pearson.com. Samaya's asking, on task B and C of the speaking, is the teacher supposed to focus on only one subtopic, or does he or she need to cover? It's up to you. You deal with the general topic, and what you might find, Samaya, is that the most able candidates will do 1 or possibly 2 subtopics, and they'll do them in more depth. And for the weaker candidates, you might need to go a little bit wider. But it's the topic area, and then you decide how you deal with the subtopics. Yeah, click about results plus. Someone's asking whether there could be words outside the vocabulary list. What we're saying is that for anything to do with grades 1 to 5 in reading and listening, they shouldn't be tested, but they may be there. And when we do those things for the higher grades in reading and listening, the aim would be for there to be support in the text that supports the student to make reasonable deductions about what the word means. Okay, so from the words around it, if you don't happen to know it, you could work it out. But examiners are very careful to make sure that access is maintained. And when we talk about words outside the vocabulary list, there may be, for example, a color like, I don't know, violet or something that isn't actually on the list, but it typically in one of the texts would be included in, you know, that would say green, yellow, and violet, and you would understand from what you heard that that was a color. So the aim is to support comprehension, but there can be words from outside the list. And sometimes, for example, cognate words that are almost the same word in English, will be kind of considered fair game, and so on and so forth. So just remember that although it's an international qualification. It's an English curriculum, British curriculum qualification. But as far as possible, we're aiming not to sort of catch people out, if that makes sense. Okay, and Carmen's talked about the Vivo Edexcel textbook, and that's good. Thank you. Good recommendation. So a question about whether there's a script for the speaking exam ready-made for the teachers. We talk about all of that when we do the speaking training. So please kind of watch one of the speaking training videos, or ideally join us for one of the events. But the 2 to 3 minutes for the picture card, and then 2.5 to 3 minutes for the 3 to 3.5 minutes each for the conversations is what we're looking for. But keep in mind what I said about spontaneity. We need spontaneous response, and so that they're not scripted in that sense. The candidate cover sheet for the exam that will need to be completed ahead of the exam, and there's information in the teacher's guide to speaking about that and about exactly what you want to do. And then also finally, can the picture be a personal picture of them and their family? Yes, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure that it's a picture that's, you kind of need to approve the pictures as a teacher, and just say yes, that's appropriate and absolutely fine. Yes, that's absolutely okay. Smile's asking, what's considered a fully developed answer for speaking? 4 to 5 clauses. Yeah, I mean, we don't sort of set. What we're doing is we're assessing the whole. When we do that assessment, for example, of the conversation, we're assessing the whole of what could be 7 minutes worth of discussion under one mark scheme. So a developed answer, they're not all going to be developed up to the same degree. And so sometimes we're going to get some shorter answers, sometimes it will be longer, and sometimes we'll find that candidates give a very, very short answer to a question, and we might prompt them to do a little bit more. But what we're looking at is the outcome of the line of questioning, if you see what I mean, not necessarily the individual answers. So you might ask them a question, they give you a very short answer, and then you say, well, tell me more about that, and you prompt them, and then we're assessing the overall response to that question. But the assessment is global rather than question by question, I think is the key thing to remember. Question about whether they need to use formal register for the writing exam. My best advice is that they just need to be consistent in what they do. And so if they're writing an email to a friend, they're probably going to go with an informal do, aren't they? And if it's a more formal thing, they're z. Well, yeah, that's fine. But be consistent is the best advice to them. And for the most part in writing, they tend not to use second person constructions very much anyway, unless they're sort of asking rhetorical questions. So again, even the odd little slip with that in terms of the consistency will not necessarily mean that they don't get full marks. Right, I think that we've kind of come to the more or less the end of the questions. Is narrating events encouraged? Yes, and we do want them to narrate events. And the mark scheme, anytime the mark scheme talks about narration, then we want them to do that. But in the picture-based task, the past or future hypothesis is narrating events. So what's just happened, what's going to happen next? That's a requirement to narrate there and to tell a little story. And it's very good practice in the conversations as well for you to try to facilitates that as well. So, you know, what happened the last time your family went to such and such? You ask them that question, and then they tell you the little story. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're kind of more or less at the end of what we need to do today. It's been a long. I hope you've managed to stick on in there. It's been a long session, and I know we've gone through loads and loads of information very quickly. Make sure you've downloaded all of the stuff, and if there are questions that remain, you're very welcome to contact Rebecca Waker on teachinglanguages@pearson.com. And then hopefully we see you again at some other events in the future. If you're new to Pearson or new to this qualification, and we wish you, the best of luck with teaching, we hope you found your happy place with us and with these qualifications too. So I think I'll just say a kind of final thank you today to everyone, and again we look forward to seeing you again in the future. I'm here for a moment in case anything else appears on the chat, but thank you very much.